It is the year 1974 when a little girl aged 14 years decides to dump her infant at this very place after delivery while she was still in primary school. Little did she know that the infant will be much of help to her in future. This is a true story of Wycliffe Amayi, who is now a bishop. It is a contrast of what it had been expected. He is delivering a sermon to this congregation at the Calvary Ministry in Eldoret. He is among many infant survivors who are occasionally dumped away by parents who run away from parenting responsibilities. Wycliffe Amayi was born on 2nd November 1974 and brought up by grandmother till the age of 11 years. This is a sympathetic autobiography, but an encouragement.
When Mom gave birth to me, as per relayed history from the family, my grandmother told me that they had no prior information that she had indeed delivered. Reason for her remaining in secret was precipitated by her father's agitation on the shame she had brought to the family.
At the age of 13 years, the mother had dropped out of school while at class 6 and delivered, but she had vowed within herself that she would dump the infant shortly after delivery.
My mother had vowed within herself that she will dump me soon after delivery, and successful, she had achieved her mission.
The infant was dumped at a banana plantation meters away from their homestead and disappeared to Magadi to seek for employment. Wycliffe narrates that it is out of the family agony and disgrace that prompted her mother to run away from home.
Na fedheha katika jamii ndilo lililokuwa swala kuu kwa haya yote kutokea.
Headsman was grazing by the neighborhood was drawn by the infant's clamor for hunger and cold that had engulfed him. Details emerged that after a search was conducted in the village, that the mother had indeed given birth and ran away.
There was this man who is now late by the name Samuel Yakola, who rescued me. He called the villager and they positively linked this infant to my mother. For reasons of her tender age, my mother could not bring me up. In fact, she was my mother very late at age. More to it, I just used to call her by her name. It was my grandparents who initiated the change of call from her name to Mom.
Despite the fact that the mother had returned home after some time, the grandparents continued with parenting. He dropped from school at class 4 due to diverse economic constraints.
They took me to school, but I couldn't manage to cope up with it since I was harshly infested with jiggers and skin rash, and my feet were in a bad state. For sure, I hardly clinched anything in class while at school. I was very stupid, but hardly would any student learn anything on an empty stomach.
In a while not so long, things took a different turn altogether, and her mother left home and got married.
I was now left to aid chores in the village, where I would face harsh weathers just to comply with my many masters and just remained like a slave.
Trepidations and suffering continued to engulf Wycliffe with a little knowledge of what a world was, revolving around him, and continued aiding all his masters.
I turned to tilling people's land for a return of wages, occasionally became a houseboy and ceramic craftsman.
Akaamua kuturukia kwenye mitaa ya mji wa Kakamega akiwa na umri wa miaka 11.
My landing to the streets was prompted by a one employer who terminated my service of a houseboy. At the streets of Kakamega, I met other street boys who introduced me to the street life and skilled me with water vending and stealing from others as well, and so joined them. In return for my water vending, I just wanted a plate of food and a place to place my head, of which I used to spend my nights at the front door of a hotel. During the night, I'd play a watchman, and during the day, as a water supplier to the hotel. I was nicknamed Tyson, for I wore my only t-shirt labeled Tyson. I recount as refraining as much from stealing from people as we saw them getting burnt to death by mob justice. And so we engaged ourselves in contracts to ferry goods at terminus and water. This house you see here, I occupied it before it was even completed because of the numerous challenges that resolved around me.
A catastrophe came calling at one time in the cornel of the street life, where a fellow street boy was run down by a reversing car, as at this time they used to sleep beneath the cars at the parking lot.
We used to be in a company of 6 street children, and what made me get out of the streets was after one of us was run down by a car that was reversing and definitely knew that we would be pursued.
He fled back to his rural home, to his grandparents, and resumed his technical farming services.
Besides the tragedy that had occurred at the streets, I had gotten tired of the street life and had decided to go back to my guardians, who are my grandparents, who lay here on these graves today. And while here, I seriously embarked on farm activities.
And at one time, a group of preachers made a life changer to his soul.
Besides the tragedy that had occurred at the streets, I had gotten tired of the street life and had decided to go back to my guardians, who are my grandparents, who lay here on these graves today. And while here, I seriously embarked on farm activities.
The word became power in him, and he ventured into the ministry. Language challenges was, however, predominant, as he was only conversant with his mother tongue.
While at the rural home, I only preached in my mother tongue, which is Luya.
After relocating to Naivasha, his interpreter became of great essence to his learning of the English language, and over he has mastered himself to the language.
He did the translation for 3 Sundays consecutively, and on the 4th Sunday, I had begun speaking a bit of English.
Just have a listen. What other treasure is better of forgiveness and reconciliation?
Though I previously was shown that this is my mom, although she had denounced me, although she had done much to me, one thing for sure I know about myself is that I'm a servant, and for reasons I want to portray love, I have shown love to my mother.
The whole scenario has a happy ending, however. Despite the unfortunate past life that Wycliffe had gone through, the two have forgiven each other.
I am proud of my mother. Despite the inability to bring me up, she is still my mother, and I have done everything to give my care to her.
This is my child, and I love him so much. Even as he got hurt, I got very disturbed on who would continue giving me a hand.
The conception in you could be a blessing to you in future. You never know what plans God has for you.
The mother advises that it is better to take caution on one's action, and neither of the siblings has been of greater help than Wycliffe, for he has indeed educated them all.
In my entire life, he has fed, dressed, and sheltered me. And God has a purpose while blessing me with the first child to take care of my life. May God bless you, my son, and grant you long life.
Mungu akulinde, akusaidie kwa maisha yako, asiti kuongezea miaka.